Hello, everyone. I'm joined with Raincrow today. Welcome back to the channel, Raincrow. And we're going to talk about some personal gnosis that I received from Odin, working with the runes specifically. I actually shared the ritual that I used for this page on my channel a few videos back about personal gnosis Odin ritual. So this is one of the runes that I drew, and then I, of course, opened my mind and allowed it to be a receptacle for what Odin wanted to tell me. So the rune that I drew on 7/25, 2019, of course, is Ingus. Now, Ingus is a rune of fertility. It has very much to do with the land. It has to do with Freyr. Freyr is very much connected to the land, and the Northern European ancestors that we share actually would work with Freyr in order to have their fields blossom as they wanted them to, and to be able to reap a proper harvest. So that granted, we're going to go ahead and dive into the personal gnosis that Odin gave to me. This may not line up with a lot of what people, think about Odin or the information that he gives, but this is just my personal gnosis. So, first line, quote, "As the land is sown, no frost bites the earth, but frost will come once more. So reap what you have sown, not too early nor too late. The cycles are the template of life." End quote. Now, a lot of these quotes are going to seem like it's just talking about the land, but this also, I felt, that has a very deep significance to every individual spiritually. So, hearing that, do you see any spiritual connections? Just some thoughts.
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry if you could actually repeat that slowly again, because
Yeah, yeah, sure.
I missed a piece of it.
Okay, so quote: "As the land is sown, no frost bites the earth, but frost will come once more. So reap what you have sown, not too early nor too late. The cycles are the template of life."
Hmm. hmm I mean, that is pretty universal, I think, across a lot of cultures. But it's interesting that you're not involved in ranching or farming, and yet he's talking about. So it's
And
obviously
here's
something.
the thing. Here's the thing. All of these sentences that I'm about to read, um, I got the feeling that they're very much connected to my own spiritual journey.
Mm,
So for instance, if I say, if I was going to go to one part of the sentence, reap what you've sown, not too early nor too late. I might I might translate that to saying, um, basically take advantage of the fruit of your actions at the right time. If you do so too early, if you're trying to develop a relationship, if you're trying to make money in a business deal, make sure that you reap the fruit so that you can use them at the proper time. Because if you reap them too late, then your relationship might like fall off, or your contract or your partnership in a business might not come to fruition. You might not communicate with somebody in the proper way at the proper time for the full benefit to come to you. And this also has to do with seasons, like we're talking about economic cycles even. So as far as that first sentence, do you have anything to share before we go on to the next one?
It just reminded something popped in my head while you're talking about this. There's an old Irish Gaelic saying. It's kind of it's supportive of it, but it's almost coming at it from a negative aspect. But it's not a bad negative. It's still saying the same thing. I'll say it in Gaelic first. I learned how to say it, and then I'll say it in English. Ní hé lá na guithe, ní hé lá na scoil. So basically, it translates roughly into English. Don't make hay on a windy day. So it's kind of another way of saying take advantage of, it's like jujitsu, it's like take advantage of the movements of things,
At the right
and
time. Yeah,
yeah, at the right time. Yeah, that's what I got.
that makes sense. Okay, so we'll
Okay.
go on to the
So
next
this
one.
is what you got this is one of the things that you got while you were out on the land
No, this
or,
is this is me standing in front of my shrine, emptying my mind and allowing Odin to put things in. So
well,
I listen whenever I'm doing something like this, I'll listen to music that doesn't have words I can understand. So I'll listen to Slavic music, which I can't understand any of the words, and then
right.
that'll help the ritual kind of like flow in my head without actually using any of the words. So this is something that's just kind of like put into my head. All of these sentences here, actually, this whole book, in fact. But I'm still
I
working.
mean, it sounds like it's something that a college professor who studied all these things. It sounds like something like right out of a book. It's really wild how
Yeah,
they.
and and see, one of the names that I recognize Odin with is Wordwolf, and it's how I kind of learned how to speak much better, how I stopped stuttering, and how he just kind of tells me certain things that sound correct and can deliver understanding and knowledge. So that's very much connected to that aspect of Odin Werewolf. So let's go to the next one.
Yes. Yep.
So fire does harass dry fields, and each shaft that is dry and filled not with life or little life is excellent kindling for the fire which reaches to Asgard. So too much the thoughts in your mind must have roots which drink of primordial waters of everlasting truths, to not simply be an offering to a good crop, but the crop itself. So that's very
Yeah.
that's very hard to digest. It's very
Yeah.
thick. I'll go ahead and read it again just so we can think about
That
it some. Because
very
what
profound.
so like when I write these things, I don't look at the previous paragraph and I just move on, and then I don't look at these pages for days. So to like make sure that I'm disassociated with it. So when I'm reading it again, it's completely new. So fire does harass dry fields, and each shaft that is dry and filled not with life or little life is excellent kindling for the fire which reaches to Asgard. So too much the thoughts in your mind must have roots which drink of primordial waters of everlasting truths, to not simply be an offering to a good crop, but the crop itself. So if I was going to look at that, I would say, I don't know what I was thinking at the time because I write it down, what comes to my head, and then I leave it. If I was going to say that, I mean, if I was going to think about that, I would think that, a lot of the times we have these ideas in our life that are not filled with life. They're filled with like emptiness. They're filled with
Mm,
materialism.
mm,
Those are great kindling for producing a good spiritual crop because once you burn those, once you destroy those attachments, your good spiritual crop, your development is fertilized by those empty shafts that are burned and fertilizing the
mm.
field. So does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, I have to kind of come at it from my old Buddhist background, where they talk about. It reminds me again of where there's a teaching. I forgot where this comes from 1,000 years ago or so, but some of these teachings are not directly from the Buddha. They're from disciples
Oh,
of
I
the
know.
Buddha.
Actually, Buddhism was the first religion I started studying, and I still
Yeah,
study it. So yeah, I know what you're talking about. I mean,
yeah.
for the
So
most part, I think.
So there's a statement where someone made some time ago, I want to say 1,000 or more years ago, where they said that different. It roughly translates out to different people are like different kinds of plants or trees. So the oak, for example, or no, there's not the oak. There's a certain kind of tree that maybe it's a certain kind of oak or a certain kind of tree. It has to go through much harshness for a long time. The seed has to be battle born, like through ice and snow and fire and everything. And it looks like it's just dead, not going to do anything. And after it's gone through all this stuff, then it sprouts. And so somehow that reminded me of that. I don't know why.
That's a good point. I can't remember what tree it is either, but I've heard of that. It's like it has to be fertilized on the outside and burned and have the ability to basically be fed by that whole process of even being
But
frozen.
that different people have different amounts of time. Some people can go to a very short path, and some people it takes them 50 years, to come to any realization, not pointing to myself or anything, but some people it takes a long time, and other people they can get it in 2 weeks, 2 months, two
Yeah.
years, and other
Everybody
people,
kind of gestates their power at different rates.
yeah.
So yeah,
But
that
it's
makes
like
sense.
latent. It's something that's latent in all of us, but it just depends on when it's gonna come out. Somehow that reminded me of that. I don't know why, but it did.
It definitely makes sense. So we'll go ahead and head to the third one.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you stop in a land, pay tribute to the spirit of that land. For to
Mm,
do not is to tread upon unfriendly ground, not
yes.
disposed to allow your passage. So
Yes.
it's basically saying pay tribute to a land if you pass upon it, and otherwise it'll be unfriendly. So like even if it's even when we take this to the idea of like people, if you're not friendly to the people that you're passing through a land, the people are part of the land. If you're not friendly to them, then you're not going to get easy passage. If you are traveling a spiritual journey and you travel through, like, let's say Buddhism, and you talk to different monks, you talk to different priests, and you're not friendly to them, you can't expect knowledge in return. So there has to be an offering to people in a way. You have to be kind and be willing to offer things, but also the land itself. If you make a little offering to the land, like I did the other day in my family's land, which I'm sure you saw, then the land was so much friendlier after that. It's just about a little bit of giving back, even if it feels like nothing's receiving it when it comes to the land. You'll find that not too long after it was received, and you kind of put the offering out of your mind, leave it behind, and then you'll keep on walking and become more aware of your connection to the land after offerings like this. Would you agree?
Yes, so if I can make a couple of quick points on that, just dealing with the land and not so much the people for a moment. I feel that the offering doesn't have to be anything, whether water, corn, tobacco, or anything, whiskey, beer, anything, a pot of beans, whatever. It can be those things. You'll have to try. Different people in their different areas will have to try different things, but I wouldn't recommend, me personally, now that was your family land, and you knew what you needed to do, that was fine, but for most people going into it kind of freshly, I would say go to a spot that you know you can get to frequently, like I have a spot myself nearby here, and just sit there. Go amongst the trees and the air. If there's water, put your hand or your foot in the water, and just emanate thankfulness. Say, I thank you for being here. I came to visit you. Talk to them. Say, I came to visit you. I appreciate everything. You could even say, I'm sorry for everything that's been done if you want to go there. I don't suggest doing that because I think it kind of reminds them of how effed over they are or whatever. So you might want to just keep it more like, I appreciate you. I came here to visit you. Just very simple. And all of a sudden a breeze will come or a tree will move or an animal will come. You'll get some sort of sign. If you don't, keep going there until you do. And then you can read about the history of the area and see if it's been settled by European settlers, African settlers, whatever. And you can try offering things along the cultural lines if you want to, or just take whatever you feel like and something will happen. Like if you take a bag of peanuts and a bag of cornmeal, let's say you're walking through the woods and the peanuts fall out of your pocket.
Yeah.
They want the peanuts. I'm
So
just
so
giving
like
that.
kind of like notice the details and make that conscious connection. And
Yeah.
maybe the offering isn't the biggest part, but making that connection of consciousness,
Yeah.
extending basically the arms of your consciousness and reaching out to the land in that way. Correct?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well,
Okay, so let's.
I'm not as much of a people person as I should be, so I'll let you. You're more of a people person
Hey,
than.
well, I appreciate it. I suppose it's
Yeah.
okay. So let's go on to number 4. The heart of man is fed by the land, whom does ask for what one can give in return for its fruits. A gift for a gift. Gifu, Ingles. Those are 2 runes. Gifo means it's like a gift, a partnership, and then Ingles is, of course, the rune we're discussing. And thus the partnership is established. So let me read that in full one more time. The heart of man is fed by the land, whom does not ask, or who does ask for what one can give in return for its fruits. A gift for a gift. Gifu, Ingles. Thus the partnership is established. So that kind of goes back to offering to the land and what we talked about and making that consciousness connection maybe. So that definitely goes back to just kind of reiterating that these 2 runes, Ingles and Gifu, are partnership, are very much connected, and you have to make that partnership with the land in some way. Would you agree?
Yeah, I do agree, completely. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so let's go to the next one. The sweat of the brow does salt the land if one holds it in contempt. So that basically means even if you work hard on a land, if you are not nice to the land, if you do not consider it as either a being or something that you're working with, then no matter how hard you work, no matter how much sweat you produce, the land's not going to give back. Does that something that you concur with?
Well, yeah, and I'd like to give a short thing on that as well.
Yeah.
You can tell that that's true because the Native Americans who were here on this land, they were able to produce and live. They didn't just live like people think they live. They actually organized things in a certain way so that they cooperated with the land and the land produced for them. And so it wasn't like they were just living wild and there was wild things to get. They actually kind of cultivated and planned things, but they worked with nature and they didn't work in a I'm going to beat you up kind of thing. The Europeans, unfortunately, by the time that they came here, they weren't maybe not originally this way, but they've been made this way over the centuries. And I won't go into why I think that is because
Hmm.
I'll probably put some people off. But there was a certain organization that kind of moved out and kind of beat the pagan people out, and we'll leave it at that.
Christianity.
Yeah. Hey, there it is. So, and I think that that's been, it wasn't Christianity itself. It was how Christianity was used to beat the people up. So I'm not blaming Christianity on it itself. It's how that these corrupt leaders and kings used it to oppress people and it put them in this mindset. By the time they arrived here, John Trudell spoke of this in a video I posted the other day. By the time they arrived here, they get the land. If you look at how they worked, they're like beating the land. They're beating it up and they're actually,
Because their spiritual bodies were beat up themselves because of how
yeah,
Christianity was conferred to them. So it
yeah,
makes
yeah.
sense. They were projecting in a way.
So the Native Americans were able to live off the land in a much easier way because they cooperated and did it with love. And the other people so the furtherance of this is after 2 or 3 generations, that family had to basically leave that land and push further west or somewhere else. And they had to go, one of the reasons people moved west constantly was because the land was so beat up, they couldn't use it anymore. They had to keep moving to get new land again. And that's one of the things that happened. Whereas the Native Americans had figured out a way to be able to stay put, basically, and just cooperate with what it's a jujitsu thing again. You're moving with the energies. You're not moving against it.
That
It's
makes
all.
sense. That makes a lot of sense. I actually concur with all of that. So, moving on to the next one. So I'm trying to get to all of these before it gets a little too long.
Yep.
Be not the stranger who offers no wealth of stories, him who carries nothing to give in his travels, thus deserves nothing in return for nothing. So
Mm-hmm.
this might seem like an exchange between people, and it is. So, in Old Norse times, a traveler was to be respected, but he was also expected to carry stories. He was expected to give something back that he knew that of lands far off or what he came from. It's very important to provide some kind of news and even spiritual knowledge from where he came from. So, it's getting back to the idea that if we treat the land like a person, and we talk to it, we tell it stories, we understand it and make it part of our, I guess you could say, our personal gnosis, in that cooperation of understanding. Even without making physical offerings, the land becomes like a friend. So wherever you came from, even if your stories are not connected to that land, it's good to speak to it and transfer knowledge from other lands where other landwights live. And it might feel for a lot of people like we're just talking to ourselves, but really, it's us talking to the land quite literally. Would you concur with that?
Yeah. I just have a quick question. When you're communicating with the land and you're getting kind of readings or messages or whatever, do you have like a kind of a communicating with the land diary kind of thing that you write these things, or you have just one general?
I do. I would say that these are from Odin, but these are very much connected to the land. But I do have, so I use the same tactic with the land. I clear all the thoughts out of my head and just allow it to speak to me. And I'm very observant of the circumstances around me. So I'll observe something, and then a rock being hit by a bug or a stream gliding by and taking off a chunk of dirt. All these like little tiny details, or maybe even an insect killing another insect, will spur a thought, and then that thought will continue to snowball into a grander idea. So it's
Hmm.
very much similar with how I work with Odin, but I'm working with that landwight. So that is something that I do.
So maybe Odin is using those things to communicate with you.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't write this when I was on the land, but I feel like a connection to the land that I'm on right now, and of course my family's land. So he wanted to tell me some things about that in particular, as far as like the land in general, because he wanted to educate me based on that rune I drew a certain day, and he wanted to educate me on that rune and how to understand the land through that rune. So that rune itself is very powerful. But him allowing me to connect to that rune through himself, because he is kind of the master of runes, made it that much more potent for knowledge to be transmitted to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so let's see. When you see your, so I have two more here. When you see your father, do you not feel love? When you understand the courtship your father had with the land, how can you not fall in love in the same way? For the land blooms and is young in every season, just as it was for your father. So that's a reference to ancestors and working with the land. So, um, in a sense, it's a statement saying that you should fall in love with the land in the same way your father did, because it's constantly new, and it's ever changing. But also, it's a relationship that all of our ancestors, well, many of our ancestors had, that we should continue, and one that is never old, no matter how far it goes down the line. It's a continuously new spiritual experience to be connected to the land. Would you agree?
Yeah. I think Galina Kraskova said something in one of her videos that really goes with that, and that she was saying that when you're connecting with these things, if people will say, "Well, I didn't get along with my father," she would say, and it wasn't necessarily about that, but she would always say, if you can't see that as a positive thing, then go to the grandfather. Not then go to the great grandfather. If you can't have anybody for 100 years, then think about your ancestors from 2,000 years ago. Reach into the taproot however you can, whether it's close by or whether you have to go. We have a lot of ancestors
Yeah.
from 1,000 to 2,000 years ago. So if the ones closer to us aren't something that we can connect with, then connect with further back. That's
Yeah.
something that came across
That makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you made that point. And let's get to this last one at the end here. The seed of ash is terrifying to the plowsman, but it should be far. It should be far, or fair. He is one with the land, and his spirit is struck a blow when the land is as well. So the scent of ash is terrifying to the plowsman, basically. But it should be far from that, for he's one with the land, and when it is struck a blow, he is struck a blow. So this one's a little bit more confusing, but basically the plowman should not be terrified for ash, or for the destruction, the burning of some of the land, because he's terrified because he's one with the land, but he has to look further through his spiritual sight to see that whatever blow he struck and the land is struck, that provides fertilizer for the land. So I mean, it might be devastating to have your crop burned by accident, not something you caused, but and you might feel struck by a blow, but just know that it will provide fertilizer for another crop in the future. Is basically what I was getting from that. That was a little sketchy as far as wording, but like I said, I don't really go back on these and reword them. But yeah, does that make sense?
So that right there reminds me of how the Lakota and all the Plains tribes would burn like thousands, if not millions of acres of land, and the new growth would come up. That new growth had more nutrients in it than the larger plants, and the buffalo would come on like crazy and eat all that up. And of course, they lived almost exclusively off the buffalo. I would say 90% of their everything, their house, their spoons, their thread and needle, their meat, and everything was from the buffalo. Now they had choke cherries and other things they would get, but berries and things, and maybe some potatoes or something through trade or whatever, but they're 90% plus was the buffalo. So that they would actually burn thousands, if not millions of acres of land. And so that kind of regenerated the land. And now the scientists, the agricultural scientists, are saying that the Great Plains isn't producing as much naturally as it used to. And they're rethinking it. They're thinking that maybe they have to go back and do some of those practices that the native people did years ago, because it brought not only the plants, but it brought the prairie dogs the prairie dog and the bison and the burning are all like a triple cycle that replenishes the land. It just the the animals that burrow into the ground, they aerate the land. And
Yeah.
then the new growth, stimulates, and then the buffalo eat that up, and it's just a continuing cycle. And if they don't do that, it's like things don't grow in the same way. They grow, but not as, so they're looking at this. It's funny because they rejected this for years, and now they're looking at like, oh, maybe they were onto something. I find that.
I mean, well, obviously they knew the land and knew what it needed,
Yeah.
and they learned from experience, but also through connecting with the land, realizing what it actually needed. And like in our lives, we have to do the same thing. Like, what part are we going to burn to allow new growth from for our spiritual staff to feed upon, to have a reservoir of life energy, so that we can continue on past the so-called field that we're on, metaphysically speaking. So, just in closing, do you have any recommendations for people? And then we'll kind of like close this video up because it's getting a little bit longer than I planned. But go ahead.
I think my recommendations were already in there about, going to the land and just kind of be there. Don't worry about offering anything. Just communicate. Just sit there. If you can't communicate, just sit there for a while until you get comfortable sitting there. Just kind of ease into it. But I had a question, like from all of these things that you got from Odin there, what is your big takeaway in a capsule from all this? What is the
Every single sentence here, I developed a big takeaway just from reading them. Um, I have a feeling that Odin wants me in particular to learn appreciation for the land that I don't have. I mean, as far as like, I haven't considered the land rights in a proper fashion for a very long time. And he's trying to tell me that even if you or your parents or, they don't understand the land that they don't understand the land in the way they should, or I don't understand the land in the way I should. Um, I can go back, like you said, and really look back at my ancient ancestors, and the land itself is just as much an individual as Odin is. And without going into further detail, because I'm kind of trying to end this, but yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm still thinking about because this is new to me again because I wrote it down, I didn't read it, and I moved on. So I'll have to think about this some more, to be honest, because
I
that's
foresee
the
a lot
nature
of
of.
videos. I foresee you making a lot of videos related to this
Oh yeah, for sure.
new
Hey,
avenue.
thank you
Yep.
very much, Rain Crow, for joining me. It's always good to have you back on the channel. Do you want to shout out your own channel before we go?
Just Rain Crow on YouTube, or you can find me at my real name, Lance Fallon, on Facebook. But my Facebook page is a little more political. Although we have the Fellowship of the Weird, WYRD. That's more of the spiritual side of things. So I have my main Facebook page is the political, then the Fellowship of the Weird is spiritual, and the YouTube Rain Crow is more spiritual as well. So
Excellent. Good to have you here. If any of you at home have any questions, comments, concerns, shoot them down in the comment section below. I'd love to respond to them. I'm sure Rain Crow will look at them as well. Now, however you live in your life, no matter if you're in city, suburb, or you're out in the country, learn to appreciate the land, get close to it, find out what it needs, and it'll find out what you need and often give it to you. Thank you very much, and I'll see all of you on the channel in the future.
all right.